Welcome to ChannelWaves, the podcast where channel leaders share success strategies, best practices, and emerging trends, brought to you by Structured Web. Here's your host, Stephen Kellum.
Welcome to ChannelWaves podcast, Structured Web View and Everything channel. I'm your host, Stephen Kellum. And joining us today to talk all things video is Robert Cassard, founder and CEO of Voodoo Video Marketing and author of Video Growth Hacking, a guide on how everyone, and he means everyone, can leverage video in their marketing efforts. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you, Stephen. Always nice to be here.
Hey, thanks for coming back again. This is our second part. And the first part, a couple of days ago, we sat down, we talked about what works in video today, why it's so important, some of the challenges around getting partners engaged, and we talked a little bit about the future. The one thing we talked about briefly was the distribution of marketing and where it's being used. And I know you have a list of 10 items. Listeners and people really like lists, and so it's a really good list. And I think we're gonna start with Pinterest at number 10, and I think we're gonna end up at website at number 1. Correct?
I didn't think you were going to give it away like that. So yeah, basically what we're talking about today are, what are the video distribution platforms for business? What's working, what doesn't? And I thought I might pepper you with a little bit of information about the monthly active users on each platform. I think it's kind of interesting to know what's happening in that way, what the trends are.
Okay.
So coming in at number 10 is Pinterest.
Okay.
A lot of people don't even know what Pinterest is, but it does have 85 million users in the US. It's got almost 500 million users globally, but it's one of the few platforms that actually is dropping in usership, I guess we could call it. But I want to mention Pinterest because it's sort of an unsung hero of certain businesses. Now, particularly in consumer products or anything that has to do.
For me, I was going to say, for me, it's a consumer piece. When you say Pinterest, I think recipes and how to sew something.
It is more than that. And what I've seen, I know a number of marketers who, if they're wooing a small business audience, particularly if it's okay to have it skew female and Gen Z, which frankly, a lot of buyers in technology are Gen Z, right? They're getting younger and younger. It can actually be an amazing place to be, because one of the things that's great about Pinterest is it's less crowded, therefore it's cheaper. It's easier to dominate a category. So, I mention it not because I think it's going to be the best choice for most of our B2B users, but it's an interesting one. There are opportunities there, and I've seen companies use it really effectively, even in B2B applications. So
Pinterest, that's interesting for me to see that it could be used in a business perspective, but your point's very valid, right? I think less crowded, maybe there's an opportunity for something depending on the product, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Okay. All right. Coming in at number 9, you have Instagram, which makes a lot more sense to me in the technology space, but you tell me.
So 127 million users in the US, about 1 billion globally. So it's a big market. The challenge with Instagram, from my perspective, is that it's such a visual application. If you're going to do anything on it, your video has to look great, right? Particularly as a company, if you're doing a company video. And it's really designed for short attention spans, right? It's like a minute or less is pretty much the sweet spot for video on Instagram. So, you also got another challenge, which you got on Instagram. You have to decide whether you're going to do your video landscape, meaning wide, or if you're going to do it vertical. A lot of the audience is looking at vertical. They're looking at their phones. That's interesting. It's a mobile dominant platform. But one thing I've seen companies do well is to do teaser videos that will then pull a viewer over to a website to watch the rest of the video.
Okay.
But I got to say, that's a pretty sophisticated maneuver to try to drag somebody with you from one place to another. And, not for the faint of heart. I think in general, the average, the vendors can use it effectively. I think partners, not so much. It's going to be a challenge for them.
Okay. All right. How about the next one? Yeah. And I find this fascinating. The next one you had was TikTok, and you had that at number 7. And it's blowing up in conversation, but you have it ranked as number 7.
I mean, if I can, I'd like to lump number 7 and 8 as Twitter and TikTok, because to me, those two there's a lot of frenzy about both of those platforms right now.
Yeah.
But honestly, neither one has proven to be particularly effective for B2B. In my opinion, one of the problems with both Twitter and TikTok is that either of those platforms, there's such a volume of content on them. It's kind of like throwing your video into a massive river, and the river is moving really fast, right? So the vast majority of videos that get put up there without any payment,
right,
they get a handful of views and then it's over, right? If you pay, it can be a different story. So, just kind of to set that up. In terms of other things, Twitter seems to thrive on controversy. There's a ton of snarkiness there.
right.
TikTok is thriving on cleverness and distraction. So the videos that tend to thrive there and get a lot of free views, they aren't generally educational, right? And most B2B content is educational just by nature. You're trying to educate potential buyers and do it in this very, sort of a calm, trustworthy way. Hard to build trust on TikTok because it's such a frenzied, I'm flicking all the time to see what's next. So I hear all this talk, hey, there are older viewers on TikTok, right? That should work. Are they in a buying mindset? Are they in a I want to educate myself mindset when they're there? That's my question. And then the last thing that I'm going to be honest, I despise about both Twitter and TikTok is if you don't grab a viewer in the first 2 seconds, they're out of there. So that's a very high bar for the average business communicator to say, I'm going to hook someone literally in 2 seconds and I'm going to keep them with me when there's that temptation to go to the next video that's going to be clever, fun, whatever. So they're tough.
I will say this. I have seen more, I'm going to say, personalities in the channel putting out TikTok, and from an awareness perspective, from maybe an individual branding, and that individual branding carries over into the corporate branding. Perhaps that's where it's heading. But it's been interesting for me to see people in the channel asking, do you have a TikTok strategy?
It's always worth asking. I guess the question is, are you seeing the statistics from those folks? Like what kind of viewership are they getting?
Yeah. And so I've talked to a couple of people about that, and it depends on your perspective, right? If you can build your brand and be ahead of the curve, if you're in the next place, if you're willing to invest in that. And I think for individuals that are remarkably comfortable with video, okay, I'm a digital adopter. I am not a digital native, and I've learned to work with video, right? But for those who it is just second nature, and it's just so easy for them to sit down and they're at an event and somewhere, and it just becomes somewhere else that they're going to build awareness and create a nice TikTok video. And I got to say this very frankly, some people are more clever on video than aren't. So I guess my recommendation is if you can play the game and you can do it,
yes,
do it. If you can't,
agreed,
maybe don't.
And the other side of that is anything that you develop for TikTok could potentially be used, for example, on YouTube as a short. It has to be a minute or less, but there something that I didn't really think a lot about when we were compiling this top 10 was that side of it, where what about if you're just going to post things on multiple platforms, and so TikTok and YouTube Shorts sort of go hand in hand. And so if you leverage it in both places, I can see that, because then you have this long-term shelf life in YouTube and searchability in YouTube, which you theoretically have in TikTok, but nobody is searching when they're on TikTok. They're just not. They're doing other stuff. I completely agree. If you are a person who's really comfortable on camera and inherently kind of funny or interesting, or you have a different way of looking at things, or you're iconoclastic or something like that, then maybe you got a shot on TikTok. But I think for the average business to business person who hasn't spent a lot of time on a video cam, it's a tough one to stand out and have it really be worth the time. All of this is about where are you going to get the best ROI from your time? That's why I have TikTok way down there. Okay.
The next one is Facebook. Personally, I might have put TikTok ahead of Facebook, because Facebook, to me, is it fading? To me, it just seems to be fading. And maybe that's my personal exposure, and maybe it's because as a digital adopter, I grew up as Facebook as actually being something private. And for me, Facebook was always
Right.
a intimate group of friends that I would share with. How long's Facebook been around? I have 130 Facebook friends. I don't think I need any more Facebook friends.
Interesting. So TikTok has 180 million users in the US and Facebook has 242 million. All right. So, it's basically TikTok has 2/3 the viewership. They're growing faster. Facebook has plateaued quite a bit in the US. But it's interesting because what Facebook has that none of these other platforms have is years of behavioral and user data, right? Sure. So I don't really advocate Facebook as an unpaid platform. I think you can put a lot of energy into putting a video onto Facebook and kind of get nothing or very little from it if you aren't willing to pay to promote it. But so let me add a couple things. The number one rule on Facebook is if you're going to put anything there, it better be a native video. You need to actually upload the video to the Facebook video platform, right? It needs to rest on Facebook servers. Okay. There's a logical reason for that, right? Which is if I put an external video link, let's say I have a YouTube video and I put a link into Facebook to promote that video. Well, Facebook has no incentive to promote that video because it's going to take somebody off their platform, right? So the bottom line is if you upload to Facebook directly, it will massively outperform an external video link. So that's just something to know. Don't waste your time on external video links there. It's typically like 10 times greater for greater click-through for native videos. But here's the thing about Facebook. If you're willing to pay for exposure, you can buy really targeted exposure and it's pretty darn cheap, right? And part of what's so magic about it is when you go back into the Facebook advertising platform, what you see is that you can target people based on their interests, very specific technology interests, for example, or people they follow. Hey, this person follows Dave Michaels. Oh, guess what? I can target that person. It's pretty interesting when you start to think about that there are people that you can use as your advertising drivers and your targeters, right? Now, another thing I've seen companies do really effectively is just to have an ongoing follower building campaign on Facebook, targeted like crazy, right? And it may grow very slowly. It might be I'm getting 5 extra followers a week or 10 followers a week or something. But imagine after you do that for a few years, suddenly you've got a few thousand followers, all of whom are interested in technology topics like the ones you're promoting. And it's incredibly inexpensive to remarket to those people. So you can create video content and for pennies on the dollar, buy direct exposure where your videos are going to show up in their feed. Now, are people in a buying mood in Facebook? Surprisingly, yes. They may not be buying large ticket technology while they're there, but they now have more often associated being on Facebook or feed, looking at their feed and seeing some things that they're really interested in. A ton of Facebook users have bought something when they're surfing on Facebook.
Well, when you just said, hold on, you just said surfing. Sorry to interrupt. You said surfing. So I bought a surfboard. I bought a stand-up paddleboard, and I bought a grill on Facebook. That's the marketplace. So there
you go.
So I did buy something, but I'm not going to buy, networking equipment or servers.
Right. But if that showed up in your feed and it were positioned the right way, it's something you might take a look at. In fact, you might just be surprised, like, wow, I never thought I'd see networking equipment on Facebook. What is that? It's surprising.
Okay, that's interesting. I would have thought that there's a pretty big gap between 5 and 6. We're going to jump into 5 right now. I look at 6 to 10. Maybe you could pull them together. I think when you get to number 5, which is LinkedIn, you're taking a pretty big jump.
I think that's safe to say. And again, Facebook probably worthless if you're not paying for specific targeted marketing, right? But worth quite a bit potentially when you are. LinkedIn. Okay, so we got 170 million users in the US, about 700 million globally. They are pushing video actively right now, so it's becoming a hotter and hotter place for business videos. Just like Facebook, they want you to upload directly to their platform. Again, they don't want to lose people if they can avoid it. But if you do have external links on LinkedIn, you'll see like maybe a 2 or 3 times multiplier if you uploaded it natively in terms of the number of views. Whereas on Facebook, it's about a 10 times multiplier. So,
Right.
LinkedIn is less, they're less, they're not hoarders, put it that way. They're willing to let people leave their platform. I think partly because they know they're going to come back.
Right.
It is the business platform, right?
It is, right.
So, in terms of LinkedIn and LinkedIn video, there are a couple of sweet spots. One of them is a short brand awareness video, 30 seconds ish for your company. Should probably just have it. It's a good idea. In general, the format that seems to do really well as far as talking about specific products is sort of a high level explainer, sort of up to 2 minutes, relatively casual and real, needs to be authentic. I think a lot of the videos that are doing really well on LinkedIn aren't necessarily the professionally produced high-end commercial style. People don't want commercials, but to have a real person from the company talking about a product that's being launched or something like that, that can be pretty powerful. And then the last thing that also tends to work well on LinkedIn are really long form, like webinar stuff.
Right. Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. I've done several, and you can get thousands of people, and it's actually very interactive on a webinar.
Yes. The other thing, so they've added live streaming. I mean, it's a relatively, recent thing. But so, companies that are using that creatively are doing things like, hey, we're broadcasting a company event and we're going to do it live on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn loves them for it, right? It's like suddenly LinkedIn goes, you're using our platform, we're going to reward you for that. Road shows, that kind of stuff. So it's good and getting better is what I would say about LinkedIn at number 5. And
before we get to number 4, maybe we can back it up and talk a little bit demographics. So when you go to Facebook, it's not, I don't think it's as business oriented. And if you look at the average age that the user of Facebook, let's just say it's skewing north of 40s, right? And then you move into, that young group, like my kids who are in their 20s. I mean, they don't even know what Facebook actually is, right?
Right.
And then you move to LinkedIn, and it gets a little bit better because they've understood, if they graduated from college, that generation, that it is the business platform. So I think you're getting better in demographics there, having a broader spectrum.
No one is going to come away from this podcast thinking, I got to just be in this one place and I'm done. What we're really talking about here is giving you some parameters so that you can come out and say, I think I ought to be in these 3 places. They're likely to be the 3 most helpful for me, or something like that. That's what we're hoping for.
So number 4, you had as YouTube alternatives, and then we're going to get to number 3 would actually be YouTube.
So YouTube alternatives, what we're talking about, the primary YouTube alternative in terms of a public platform for video is Vimeo.
Right.
They've got about a little north of 40 million users in the US. So they're about 1/5 the size of YouTube, which has about 260 million in the US. So the thing about Vimeo is that its main differentiator from YouTube is visual quality. So if that's really important to you, if having super high-end visuals, 4K plus kind of video, if that's important, then Vimeo becomes a really good choice. From my perspective, I look at Vimeo and say, why would I want to be there instead of YouTube? I wouldn't, from my perspective, because the YouTube is so much more searchable. It's integrated with Google. It's got all these benefits. But what Vimeo is a great place to also put your stuff. Why not post in both places? Because now you make your content searchable to a larger total universe. By the way, Vimeo and YouTube have a lot of overlap in terms of who watches them anyway. So you don't get a ton more exposure, but the one good thing about Vimeo is there's less competition there. So, that can be a benefit. The other thing, when I say YouTube alternatives, some companies have an aversion to putting certain videos on YouTube because they think, oh, these are more private. These are things that we don't want our competition to see what we're doing. You can use unlisted videos on YouTube, and they're ultimately very hard to find if you don't know where they are. They're not going to appear in search and all of that. But that really comes down to then private video hosting. And there are a lot of companies vying for your private video hosting, Bright Cove and Vidyard and Wise Owl and others. These are sort of like these corporate video platforms, and what they tout is control. You get to control how your player window looks. You get to control what demographic and analytics you're getting back. It's your universe. That's very attractive to most corporate marketers. But ultimately, they need to understand that everything they put on Vidyard or WiseOwl or any of these other platforms isn't searchable. So it's not findable anymore. It's totally up to them to get those videos out there and get eyeballs on them. So, there are benefits to them for certain uses, but I wouldn't say they're the end all, because searchability is really, to my mind, the number one thing in terms of free eyeballs.
Right. Which then gets you to YouTube.
Exactly. Okay. So, all right. So number 3 is YouTube. 210 million active users in the US every month, not 260, like I said before. To me, this is still, in terms of public forums, this is the place to be. And that's because it's still the most often searched and the most searchable, right? It's the number 2 search engine behind Google at this point. It's going to be interesting to see how AI starts to affect these search engines, by the way, because Bing just introduced AI into its search engine, and I'm going to be really intrigued to see if people start getting addicted to that. Now, if they do, Google's going to add it too, so we kind of know that's coming. Yeah. But nonetheless, just back to this number 2 search engine. The other really great thing about having your videos on YouTube is that now, in a Google search, YouTube videos actually show up in more than a quarter of Google searches, and their little thumbnails and everything else. So that's a great advantage. Costs you $0. You might as well play it, right? 87% of marketers say YouTube is a really effective channel for them, and that's an astronomical number. And about the only thing that I see as a warning or caveat that I would give to someone who's thinking about YouTube, putting videos on YouTube, is you have to own any content that you put there. And you got to think about your videos in a little bit different way. Like on TikTok, you can go grab a Rihanna track and create a TikTok and have Rihanna playing in the background. You can't do that on YouTube. Your content will be flagged. YouTube has very sophisticated copyright flagging algorithms. And, it's up to them kind of arbitrarily whether you get a strike for using that thing and they tear it off, or they just say, oh, it's okay, you can use it, it's going to be monetized, and so is going to get the money from it. Right. The bottom line is, though, you need to own your content. And so this can be a stumbling block for some companies that aren't producing a lot of video. They can have a YouTube channel, maybe it just has one company video on the channel. That's okay. But they're going to need to produce more video in order to sort of flesh out the channel and make YouTube value it and start pushing it in their algorithm.
So number 2 is emails. Very quickly, my take on that before you jump into it. And you can tell me, right, I should actually listen to you before I tell you my take. But that's okay.
No, I want to know your take.
No, it's kind of cool for me to tell you my take, and then you can tell me that I'm just...
I like that. Yep.
That's totally fine. I only open emails for 2 reasons. The intent has to be there. I mean, it's got to be so much something that I'm thinking about that. Or someone says, I made a video for you. And now if the intent is there and someone says, I made a video for you, okay, I'll actually look at that. I get 300 emails a day, and I probably open 1 or 2 on something like that. If someone says, I made a video for you,
yep, I'll
open it.
True. So I was even asking myself, like, why did I put that at number 2? And the core reason is because email still has a 57-to-1 ROI when it's done well. So in other words, for every $1 you invest in email, if you're coupling it with video, you should get $57 back. I mean, that is crazy ROI, right?
Right.
My own personal experience. Okay, now I've literally launched thousands of campaigns for hundreds of clients, millions of recipients. I can look at all those statistics and have looked at them over the last 15 years or so. It is a rare campaign that when you send it out does not generate some leads, right? It's rare. And with both of my companies, we literally get leads every single time we send out an e-video campaign. So, why wouldn't we do it? It'd be insane. The only drawback on email campaigns is your list. right? It's your owned list. It needs to be a permission-based list if you're going to use one of the bulk email platforms out there, or you're going to get endlessly hassled, which you should. You deserve to be endlessly hassled if you're using, junk lists that you're buying. You need to cultivate your own list. But if you've got a good list, it's gonna kick butt, and do very well for you. So a few years back, my company, Voodoo Video Marketing, used to own our own email platform. For years, we owned our own email platform because we wanted to measure all the stats and everything else. And at a certain point, it was getting harder and harder to get to the inbox. You needed full-time people that were in there figuring out what the filters were doing and why is this getting blacklisted and why not that. And, you have to sort of ride all your customers like they're criminals. That's not a permission-based list. So we got to a point where we said, we don't want to do that. We don't want to be the police anymore. And we shopped around and we decided that Constant Contact was sort of the best practices for business purposes in terms of just bulk emailing, right? It was good for us. It worked for what we want to do. And so what we've done over the past few years is to take our clients and move them and have them become managed accounts under Voodoo's Constant Contact account. My dog is here saying hello. And they get certain benefits. Like one of them is you get rid of the Constant Contact branding, right? So that's a key thing because a lot of people hate seeing Constant Contact all over their emails, which I don't blame them. But the bottom line is that, Constant Contact and many of the other platforms that are out there all they do is make sure that that emails are going to be whitelisted to the inbox. They make sure that the statistics that you get in terms of clicks and, if you're going to remarket and move somebody from one list to another and that type of thing, that it all works perfectly. And, so my attitude is let's leverage those platforms that know what they're doing and know how to get to the inbox. If you can get to the inbox and you've got a good list, e-video is golden.
Okay. And number one, all right, I already spoiled it at the beginning of the podcast.
That's okay.
It's a website.
Yep. It's your own website. So, I say this, I truly am a broken record because I say every single entity, any company that has a website must have a video on their homepage. And part of that is because the Forrester research statistic, which says you are 53 times more likely to appear on page 1 of a Google search if you have a video on your homepage. A 53 times multiplier. How possibly could someone think, well, I'm just going to ignore that and not put a video on my homepage? Because it's too expensive or it's too much of a hassle or I don't know what to say or, whatever your excuse is, you got to get past it. And I can tell you all the reasons why.
Well, let's unpack that a little bit. What kind of video, right? Is that, if I'm a partner, is that my CEO talking about my company and my brand, or is it a video that you could use from your vendor that is talking about their product? And we talk about that all. It's one of our tactics on our platform is content syndication, right? And how can you take not only images, but you can take video from your vendors and put that on your website.
Sure. So what we're talking about on your homepage, it does need to be a video that you own, right? Because it needs to go on your YouTube channel, which again, we said you have to own it for it to be able to exist there with no copyright issue. And then it's embedded in your homepage of your website. So the reason why it's important to have it on YouTube instead of another platform is because Google, part of the reason you get this massive SEO boost from having a video on your website is that they can see, it's on YouTube, which is their platform, right? Alphabet owns Google and YouTube. And now the Google algorithm is going to, it sort of incentivizes people to have their company video on their YouTube channel. So it's kind of all one little happy family. So in terms of that, it's got to be, so let's talk about partners for a minute. Our audience may be vendors, but they need to understand how can you work with partners to, make them
to get them
do better,
to take them, to get them to take advantage of video.
So my company, Voodoo, we work with a lot of vendors and channel partners to get company videos on the partner homepages. And what we seek to do is to get the vendor to approve some MDF to subsidize the production of that homepage video for the partner. So the reason, how can the vendor justify that? The answer is because you're going to do this problem solution video. You're going to look at the company, the partner company, and you're going to say, what are the problems that we solve? You elucidate the problem first, and then you come and you show how the partner solves it. And then guess what? The vendor's solution is part of how they solve that problem, right? So the vendor gets a little feature, a mention, maybe their images of their product are scattered into the video. The idea is that it's a package. We put enough vendor information and content in that video so that it does qualify for MDF, but not so much that it turns the viewers off and makes them say, oh, this is just a commercial. It's a delicate, you're walking a tightrope on that one. But that's what we recommend to those companies.
Well, I think there's so many interesting things we could talk about that, right? And what a partner sells, they sell their brand versus the vendor's brand and the MSPs and a lot of different partners. Right. I think that's interesting on the MDF. The other thing is a lot of partners have 14 vendors. So which vendor is on the homepage for that, right? It could be their primary vendor. It could, but those are all the questions you kind of got to pull together.
Right.
Once again, a lot of partners would say, hey, I don't sell this hardware or this SaaS solution. I sell risk mitigation and business continuity. Now, I think a smart vendor can come and say, hey, we help you do all that, right? I think you can work together to solve that problem, right? And why would you not if you could end up with a 57-to-1
53, 53x multiplier. That's
53x multiplier. Sorry, 57, 53. I don't think anybody's going to really argue it's 50 plus, right?
Right. So in general, what we see is that often the MDF approval will be for 50% of the cost of that company video. Now, that's not going to be 50% of the national average cost of a company video, because if you start looking at national averages and you say, what does it cost a company to do a fully professional national quality video, custom built from scratch on their homepage? The answer is 16 grand. Most partners are not going to pay 16 grand for a video. So, and we know that, we've seen it a million times. So what we tried to do, Voodoo spent a lot of time trying to crack this code. And what we ended up realizing was that we could create a template for a company video that was relatively universal to most resellers, depending on their particular, silo or niche. But let's say voice and data, that's a good example. We have a voice and data template. And when a company comes to us, a partner company comes to us and says, we want a company video, we figure out how we're going to customize that template, and there are like 12 different ways that we'll customize it. And so it feels like a completely original video. They own it as an original video, so they can put it on their YouTube channel. If a vendor is willing to come in and pay 50%, or multiple vendors, to combine together to pay 75, 80, 90, maybe 100, we've had a lot of cases where partners get their videos completely funded by MDF. You just need to be creative about it. And it's, this is not cookie cutter stuff. There's going to be negotiation that goes into getting this stuff to happen. But we find vendors are generally, the enlightened vendors know, if we can drive more people to that partner's website and they'll see us in the context of that partner, it can only be good for us. And in general, it's probably going to be a lot better than the meet and greet that they may have sponsored, or something like that. I mean, I shouldn't probably say that those are great too. Belly to belly is great, but this is really key. Having that homepage video is so important. And I tell partners, even if you don't have MDF, you better darn well do this video. And, so what we spent a lot of time doing was figuring out how low can we get the price. And we've cracked it to the point where, depending on the amount of customization required, the video is going to be somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000. That's a lot less. It's less than a third the cost of just going to a videographer and saying, set me up, Plus, in terms of work, can't even measure the difference. If you go to get a custom video made and you're going literally from scratch with your scripts and everything else, that's usually a 2 to 3 month process. We got it down to 10 days. So that's how we do what we do. And vendors love that too. We can fit it within this quarter for MDF, right? Oh my God. Yeah. In that quarter. Well, I'm sure they do. I'm sure everyone would. I mean, that's once again, a third of the price. And then once again, 50 plus. And here's the thing, when you're under 5K, that video is going to pay for itself really quickly in terms of the new additional traffic that site is getting. It's a very worthwhile investment. And the cool thing too, it sits there on the site for years in most cases, right? I mean, a typical shelf life is 5 to 7 years on these videos. So it's just sitting there improving your SEO every single month. If you think about it, anybody who found the site who wouldn't have if the video wasn't there, that's just all gravy. Every single lead that comes through the site is gravy. So it's pretty cool, pretty easy.
All right, Robert, thank you for taking some time with us today.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you for giving us these 10 great ideas. Once again, what's the best way for people to reach you? They can go a little bit deeper. Oh, and don't forget, you can plug your book as well.
Oh, my pleasure. So I have a website, videogrowthhacker.com, videogrowthhacker.com. That's probably the best place to go. They can find out about the book. It's called Video Growth Hacking for Channel Chiefs. So it has a channel chief focus, but it's appropriate to anybody who's trying to figure out how to use video marketing in a structured, strategic way. And I'm happy to share a free ebook copy of that. They don't need to go and buy it. So all they need to do is reach out to me. I like to give people on your show only, I like to give people my personal email address, which is rjwcassard, rjwcassard @gmail.com. So reach out to me by email or just go to my site, Video Growth Hacker, and you can reach me there as well. Just tell me what you're interested in and we'll talk. That goes for things like templated videos for your homepage too.
Okay. Hey, Robert, once again, thanks for joining us for the second time.
Always fun.
Hey, thanks for listening in. Everyone have a great day.